Welcome everyone to a Second Chance Nutritional Diet webinar. Today we are going to talk about low protein diet for CKD patients. We are back again with Lindsay Ducharme. Lindsay, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Well, go ahead and take a second, just introduce yourself, and then go ahead and get into your presentation.
All right. Thanks. I'm glad to be here. I'm Lindsay Ducharme. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm board certified in renal nutrition. I have a private practice, Vital Kidney Nutrition, where I help people with early stages of chronic kidney disease help slow the progression of their kidney disease with diet. So today we're going to be talking about low protein diets for chronic kidney disease. So first, I just want to start off talking about what is protein and why do we need it? So protein, most people associate it with just muscle, but protein is really needed for every part of our body. It makes up our skin, organs, bones, cartilage, and virtually, every cell in our body has some protein. Protein also helps make up enzymes in our body. These are things that carry out different chemical reactions. Proteins are made up of different types of amino acids. And some amino acids our bodies make, and then other amino acids need to be obtained from the foods we eat. So these are called essential amino acids. So let's talk about what foods contain protein. So most people associate protein with meat, eggs, chicken. So animal foods contain protein. So by animal food, I don't just mean like chicken and beef. Seafood counts as animal food. Uh, Dairy, any food that's coming from a living creature counts as animal foods. So that is one way we're getting our protein. And plant foods also have protein. So plant foods that are associated with more protein are things like beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, soy, so tofu or edamame, um, and also grains have some protein. So that is where we're getting our protein. So what about protein for chronic kidney disease and without? So let's start with so someone without chronic kidney disease, we don't need as much protein as you think. So most Americans are actually getting almost double the protein they need. That's just because our society is always, it's we're always pushing protein. Like you hear people saying, "Oh, eat more protein. It's good for weight loss or getting stronger." But most people do not need large amounts of protein. So the typical adult needs about 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight of protein. So eating extra protein doesn't really give us much benefits as an average adult. So if we're consuming like a lot of extra protein, that extra protein is just going to be used for energy or stored as fat. It's not like if we're eating extra protein, it's going to be building muscle or things like that. Exercise is what builds muscle. Of course, you need to have, some extra protein there, but most people, the extra protein isn't really going to be much benefit. So with chronic kidney disease, it is recommended to follow a lower protein diet. So, a low protein diet is basically less than 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. So, it could be 0.7 grams per kilogram, 0.6. but it's basically just a little bit under, the general recommendation. So there's also something called a very low protein diet, and this would be consuming anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5 grams per kilogram body weight of protein. And a very low protein diet needs to be supplemented with what's called a keto analog. It's basically a special protein supplement, but they remove the waste product because, on a very low protein diet without supplementation, you're at great risk for losing muscle mass and malnutrition, which you don't want to. You definitely want to avoid malnutrition with chronic kidney disease because that's going to make matters worse. So the reason why people with kidney disease need to have lower protein intakes is because high protein foods, like especially from animal products, they produce waste products when our body breaks them down. And it also produces acid. So the animal proteins are acid producing in our body. So as kidney function declines, the kidneys have a harder time getting rid of the waste product and neutralizing the acid. So this is why, a lower protein diet is beneficial for chronic kidney disease, because since protein is providing waste product in the form of animal protein, then less waste product is going to overall be great for the kidneys. So the less kidney function you have, the more strict you want to be with your protein intake. So if you're someone who is, early stage kidney disease, like stage 2, it's more about just normalizing your protein intake. The recommendations at that stage, it's 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight for protein. So you just want to avoid having a high protein diet. But, as the kidney disease progresses, you may want to be a little more strict, maybe going down to the 0.8, 0.6 grams per kilogram body weight. But some people, if you're someone who has history of recent weight losses, or you have other things going on, like, you're dealing with some other medical condition, like if you have cancer or something, there are times where we may not want to be as strict. So you definitely want to work in partnership with a dietitian to kind of determine what is the right protein for you. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, we do need protein. But, it's a balance of getting the protein our body needs without putting extra work on the kidneys. So sometimes that needs a nutrition consult to figure out. So let's talk about some research and how the research has shown low protein diets can benefit CKD. So there was a meta-analysis of 16 studies on low protein diets for CKD, and they compared them to diets with higher protein intake, which was greater than 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. And the meta-analysis showed that the low protein diets were associated with higher serum bicarbonate levels. So this means less metabolic acidosis. The low protein diets were associated with lower phosphorus levels. They were associated with less waste product, as we would suspect. The low protein diets were associated with lower rates of progression to end-stage renal disease. And lastly, the lower protein diets were associated with lower rate of all-cause death. So there are, a lot of benefits of doing the low protein diet. So there are, as I briefly mentioned, some risks associated with lowering your protein intake. And most of these risks are going to occur if your diet is not well planned or if you're trying to do it on your own. But some people, they may not be getting enough calories. So a lot of people, they're getting, protein is also giving you calories. So if you simply just reduce your protein without changing anything else, then you could end up having unintended weight loss. And weight loss could lead to being malnourished, which is going to cause worse outcomes. So those are some things you want to be careful with if you're trying to do this on your own. But working with a dietitian, we will be able to help you make sure you're getting enough nutrition and calories in other ways. So one thing I want to mention is there is a big difference between plant proteins and animal proteins and how our body processes them. So as I had mentioned earlier, the animal proteins, when our body breaks them down, it produces waste product, which is basically urea. But plant protein, on the other hand, it does not produce nearly as much waste product. So some people with chronic kidney disease, the more plant protein or, just substituting animal for plant protein can be a really great strategy because you're still, getting your protein, but it's going to be a more kidney friendly form. So here are just some simple strategies for reducing animal protein intake. The first being cut back on portion size, because we're used to large portions. Like an actual portion of meat is the size of a deck of cards. That's 3 ounces. But, you go to a restaurant, you're usually getting, at least like 6 ounces. So 3 ounces of animal protein, whether, chicken or beef or fish, that's about 21 grams of protein. So in the 3 ounces, you're still getting a good amount of protein. So another simple strategy is just adding in some vegetarian meals here and there. It doesn't have to be, every meal, especially when you're, first making diet changes, but even doing a vegetarian meal like 1 or 2 nights a week if you're used to having meat all the time. So plant foods are, not only more kidney friendly, but they're less protein dense. So if you had half a cup of chicken, that's about 21 grams of protein. But if instead you had half a cup of beans, that's only 7 grams of protein. So, that's a way you can, naturally lower your protein intake while still getting in, good amount of food. So some other tips, you really need to increase your intake of fruits, vegetables, starches, and fats to make sure you are getting adequate calories. As when we decrease one thing in our diet, we have to replace it with something. You want to monitor your weight. So, of course, some people may want to lose weight, so that may be desirable for them. But, if you're, underweight to begin with and you start to cut back on protein or do more plant-based and you're losing a lot of weight at once, that may not be helpful. So you want to be careful and keep an eye on your weight trends. And, depending on how much animal protein you're cutting out or how much protein you're reducing, you may need to take supplements. Your dietitian or doctor should be able to recommend, a vitamin. But as people are reducing the animal protein, you're getting less B12, vitamin D, iron. Some people may need to supplement omega-3s if they're, not doing fish. But it is doable to lower your protein intake. And I find, doing more of the vegetarian meals is definitely easier to achieve because, you're not just simply cutting back on your meat. You're replacing it with something, and you're replacing it with something high fiber and high volume. So when we're feeling satisfied at our meals and not hungry all the time, it is easier to kind of stick with something. Okay, so that was all I had on low protein diets. Do you have any questions?
I do. You know I do. You know I do. Um, so for normal people, and when we do these things, it's not just necessarily for kidney patients, but it's also for people who aren't in the space to learn as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you said too much extra protein can't necessarily be beneficial, but can it be detrimental at the same time, or is it the same way as it being beneficial? It won't be beneficial, but it won't hurt you at the same.
They haven't really shown that too much protein is necessarily harmful for people without kidney disease. Um, it just may not be as beneficial as people think. But there are definitely like people that do exercise, pretty strenuously. They definitely do need more protein, and maybe people that are elderly, they may need a little bit more to maintain their muscle mass. But I don't think it's necessarily harmful, but it's just not doing people much good often.
Right, right. So, what does a low protein diet look like to you if you have to follow that kind of diet? And I know you kind of typically do, but like, let's say,
Mhm.
like you said, there's also a lower protein type of diet. Like, if you have to follow that type of diet, what would that look like to you? Like, what would be your breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
So I mean, you definitely have to do more plant-based when you're doing the low protein diet. Um, like you could for the low protein diet, like you could do just like things like oatmeal or a cereal with almond milk because that's not a lot of protein, a fruit. Um, so you want to think of things besides eggs typically. Um, but some people, it depends on your needs because if you're a larger person, your protein needs are going to be a little bit higher. But for a lunch, I mean, things like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, um, or doing like a salad with some chickpeas, um, or like some sort of like rice bowl, like a burrito bowl type thing with like rice and beans and vegetables. And maybe adding in like a fat, like if you don't have to limit potassium, like avocado is a good thing to add for extra calories. And dinner, I mean, similar things like you could do like a stir fry, and stir fries are good for, even if you have some chicken in there, like it's easy to kind of like do mostly vegetables and then, a couple pieces of chicken. And that's a good meal, like if you have like a significant other or family members that, they're eating protein and you're trying to cut back. But pasta is always an easy one because that's easy to make without meat. Just have like vegetables instead of meat in the sauce. But those are some of the more simple meals that I usually recommend to people.
Okay, okay. So my next question for you is, what can a fully functioning kidney do compared to a kidney that's working at, let's say, like for me, I grew up with only 30% kidney function. So what are the two? What are the difference between the two?
Yeah. So, I mean, it really varies based on the person. Some people, I mean, kidney disease is silent. So, even at like, 30% kidney function, people may not always be having many symptoms. I mean, there is going to be, some buildup of waste product because, at that stage, as the kidney function goes down, you're going to have some higher creatinine. Um, but not everyone is having like metabolic acidosis isn't usually occurring at that stage. Not everyone is dealing with high potassium. Um, So I would say, I mean, it really varies based on the person, but a lot of times it is asymptomatic. But you want to think of nutrition as a way to kind of um, help prevent these symptoms from coming up. So by limiting protein early, not you don't have to be super strict at 30% function, but just not avoiding the high protein diets can help you avoid having these symptoms and obviously avoid progressing to a later stage.
Yeah, I think that's what definitely helped me go so long without without dropping until I hit 16 was because my parents made sure at least most of the time I was eating healthy. I'm a kid, so I'm gonna have those times where I'm sitting out with my cousins, go get ice cream, go get this, go get that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, they made sure that I had a pretty good diet. So my hat goes off to them for sure for being able to work together and make sure that happened. So you brought up someone having underlying health conditions or other health conditions. So for someone that has maybe kidney pancreas problems or kidney liver problems, what kind of food should they be able to eat or not be able to eat that's low or high in protein?
So both of those conditions, like if you're having liver problems or diabetes along with kidney disease, they can definitely both benefit from more of a plant-based diet. So, you know, instead of doing things like meat or chicken or fish, doing more things like beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, some of your, any type of plant protein is actually going to be helpful for both of these conditions.
Great, great. So my next question, so just to guesstimate, how long does it take for plant-based products to digest from animal food products?
I'm not quite sure. So I know there's a lot of there's definitely some studies that kind of compare how they're digested. But I know there's some controversy, or not controversy, but some people, or they used to say animal proteins are considered, complete proteins, and
Mm,
because they have more amino acids, and then the plant proteins may be missing some amino acids. So people would think they were like not as good, not as good of a source. But now we kind of know plant proteins, when we digest them, they do actually have all the amino acids, but just in less quantities and different amounts. So if you're doing plant based, you really do need to have a lot of different plant foods in your diet. Because if you're someone who only likes one type of plant protein, like say you're only eating like peanut butter and as your protein source, like you could risk, getting not enough of the amino acids. So it's important that you're having a variety of plant foods.
okay, okay. So this is my last question. So you stated that a normal portion size is 3 ounces, and when you go out to eat, you normally get 6 ounces. So with that being said, what let's talk about eating out, right? So
Mhm.
when people go out to eat, right, what are the best sides for them to get? Which are the better soups and which are like the better salads? 'Cause I know there's some that are a little bit healthier than others. Even when you're talking salads, right? There's some dressings that are healthier than others. There's some,
Mhm.
added, things added, vegetables and stuff that may be, better for you to eat. That's low
Mhm.
in protein or potassium or whatever. So just if you can, just for a second, elaborate on that.
Yeah. So when you're eating out, um, I think soups are the hardest to find low sodium unless you're going to a place like, if you're going to like a quick place like a Panera or something, or like any chain, you can actually look up the nutrition facts online. Um, But to get a soup that's lower in protein, I mean, I would just go for like a vegetarian type soup rather than you want to avoid soups that are made with a lot of milk. And obviously, if they have a lot of meat in them. But sodium is really, that makes it kind of hard to choose a soup. Um, for salads, I mean, I think most people can probably fit that in if they're getting dressing on the side to help control the sodium. Um, but again, you want to kind of pay attention because some restaurants, they may put like tons of cheese on the salad and then, some bacon, all that will add up in terms of protein. So you kind of want to, think like where you're getting your protein. So if you plan to get an entree with meat, you can always, have half at the meal and then take the rest home. Um, it's a good idea to get, one item on your plate that is going to be, a vegetable option that's going to be, low in sodium. But most vegetables are going to be fine. I would recommend like asking, you could ask for them to have it steamed or, prepared without salt. So that way, you're helping keep your sodium in check. But there are some vegetables that are higher in protein than others, like peas and broccoli. But because these are plant proteins, like it's not going to be as big of an issue. It's more like the animal protein you want to focus on. And your potassium level is going to kind of determine which vegetable you should choose. And same thing goes with like a starch. Like if you're going to do like a potato or rice, you want to kind of think about, if you're someone that needs to limit potassium, but in terms of protein, either is going to be okay. So there's definitely ways you can, eat out still.
Right, right, right. All right. Well, that's only all the questions that I have today. I know if the far was on, you have probably about a good 6 to 8 questions itself to ask. You probably be on here another 15, 20 minutes. But that's the great thing about having him on is he asks the questions that I don't think to ask about, right? So, um, but thank you, Lindsay, again. We appreciate your time. Definitely look forward to the next one that we do coming up soon. Um, it may be next month because I just found out that I'm having my open heart surgery on the 30th. So
Wow.
if we can have it before then great. Um, if not, then definitely next month during Donate Life Month for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you again. It's definitely been a pleasure as always. I'll definitely keep in touch with you about anything else coming down the line as well. So
Great. Thanks for having me.
thank you. Have a great day.